Good morning. Great to see you. Good morning and great to see you all here. Welcome to 7 human behavior hacks that increase engagement and response. So, if you work in marketing today, email, direct mail, landing pages, websites, search, social, anything where you need to influence behavior, you have your work cut out for you. And there are 3 main reasons for this, 2 of which you're probably pretty familiar with, one of which I think is going to surprise you. So let's take a look, shall we? First reason, it's getting harder and harder to reach people. Okay, we have crowded inboxes, surging unsubscribes, banner blindness. According to NewsCred, 27 million pieces of content are pumped out every day. And if you're lucky enough to get someone to land on your page, they bail again in about 10 seconds, according to the Nielsen-Norman Group. Second reason, waning attention spans. According to the National Center for Biotechnology Information, the average human attention span is 8 seconds. 8 seconds! Now that's down from 12 seconds in the year 2000. As a matter of fact, we were recently eclipsed by the goldfish. I'm not entirely sure how they measure the attention span of goldfish, but I think we can all agree it's getting harder and harder to hold the attention of the people that we want to talk to. Now, here's the third reason, and this is the one that I think may surprise you. 95% of decision-making takes place in the subconscious mind. 95%. This is a quote from Gerald Zaltman. He's a Harvard Business School professor, and he's the author of the book, How Customers Think. And he bases that statistic on the work that a number of behavioral economists and social scientists have done into how people make decisions. And what these behavioral economists and social scientists have found is very interesting. They found that people, all of us, men, women, rich, poor, highly educated, less highly educated, B2B environment, B2C environment, all of us rely on decision-making shortcuts. So what's a decision-making shortcut? It's an automatic, instinctive, reflexive behavior. Humans have developed these over the millennia as a way to conserve mental energy because we couldn't possibly weigh every bit of information before making a decision, or we'd never get around to making any. So we've developed these hardwired behaviors, and we kind of cruise along through life on autopilot. And when we encounter a particular situation or what a researcher would call a stimulus, we just default to these hardwired behaviors, giving them little to no thought. And you don't have to take my word for it. In fact, I'd rather you take the word of a Nobel Prize-winning economist. Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in 2002. He also authored the book Thinking Fast and Slow. And in that book, he explains that the brain doesn't like logical, rational, conscious thinking, and will take any shortcut it can. So let's think about that for a moment. We'll take any shortcut it can. What does that mean to us as marketers? We are trying so hard to convince people to do what we want them to do, to take the actions we want them to take, and it turns out they're not even really often paying attention to what we're saying. Things are just glossing right over them. It does not leave us in a great spot, does it? Unless we take what science has proven about human behavior and we use that to influence it. And that's what I'd like to do for the next hour or so. I'd like to share with you 7 ways that we can take what science has proven about human behavior and use it to increase the likelihood that we can get the behavior that we want from our customers and our prospects. Sound good? All right, excellent. So our first human behavior hack is something known as availability bias. And what social scientists have found is we will judge the likelihood of an event happening based on how readily we can recall an example. So, for instance, if you don't fly a lot, you might think that flying is a lot less safe than it really is, because you would draw your conclusion based on the information that's available to you, and a lot of it is in the media, what you read in the newspaper, what you see on the news, and of course the media doesn't report the millions and millions and millions of safe landings, right? No, they report the accidents. So if you're not someone who flies, and you're asked how safe is flying, you might think, well, I don't know, every time I hear a news story, there's an accident, there's fatalities, I don't think it's that safe. You would be wrong, but that would be the conclusion you would come to. So again, what does this mean to marketers? Well, people are going to judge the likelihood of an event happening, and in this case, the event would be their need for your product or service based on how readily they can recall an example. So before you ask them to buy, first, get them to think of a time in the past when they could have really used your product or service, or imagine a time in the future when it would actually fit into their lifestyle. So let's look at a few examples. Here we've got an email from Sharper Image, and they're advertising a weather alert emergency hand crank radio. And this is what they want me to buy. Now, I know you don't know me well, so I'm just going to put this right out there. I am not a hand crank kind of gal. Okay? I'm not. I think that electricity was invented for a reason. So normally, I wouldn't take a second glance at an email like this. However, the night before, I was watching the 11 o'clock news, and it was filled with stories about this storm that was blowing through the area and all the various neighborhoods around me that were losing power. So that was the last thing I saw before I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning. Fortunately, we still had power. Flipped on my computer. I'm going through my emails, and I see this one. And I go, maybe I do need an emergency weather alert hand crank radio. I could see how it would fit into my life. Or here's another example. This is from the Barack Obama campaign, and I love this example. I like to keep it in here because one of the last things Obama did before he left office was he signed an executive order instructing the various government agencies to tap into the work of behavioral economists and social scientists because he thought it was very, very powerful. And the truth is, he knew firsthand because he used it in his reelection campaign. And this is part of an email that went out when he was running for reelection. And basically, he asked people to make a donation to his reelection campaign by midnight that night. And if you did, you would be entered to win dinner with Barack. But of course, your knee-jerk response is, what's the likelihood? This is going to people all over the country. What's the likelihood I'm going to win? But then your eye is drawn to this image in the email because our eyes are, in fact, drawn to images. And we look at it, and we go, oh, well, look at that. It's not one of those really long rectangular tables. No, it's a small round one. Gee, there's only going to be 8 of us sitting there. I'll be to the president's right. My guest will be to his left. Suddenly you could see it. You could imagine it. You could envision it. It became that much more real, and it worked very well for him. Now, here's an example that's a little bit more commercial. This is from the Boston Globe. And they wanted their subscribers to get gift subscriptions to bostonglobe.com for people they knew. But they didn't say, hey, how about getting a gift subscription for someone you know? They didn't even say, do you know somebody who might like a gift subscription? No, what they did instead is they really used availability bias. They said, bostonglobe.com is an incredible gift for your, and then they listed 10 different descriptors. Your avid reader, your political junkie, your sports fan. And as you read each one of those, you mentally slotted in the person you knew that fit that description. Oh, my grandfather's an avid reader. My uncle is a political junkie. My daughter away at college is a sports fan. The next thing you know, you have come to the conclusion that there are 10 people you know that would probably like a gift subscription to bostonglobe.com. Great use of availability bias. And here's an example from a financial institution. They're trying to tee up their idea of selling a Christmas club, right? So what they do first is they say, gifts, parties, travel can bear a hefty price tag at the end of the year. So they're reminding you, the last holiday season, your bills ran up. So they set that up, and then they say, hey, why not begin saving for your holiday expenses well ahead of time? You can open a Christmas club account. So they're using availability bias. They're getting you to think of a time in the past when having this would have really come in handy to get you to say yes now. All right, our second human behavior hack is something known as social proof. And what social scientists have found is when we're not sure what decision to make, when we're not sure what to do, we follow others, particularly others who resemble ourselves, particularly others who are like ourselves. And there were a couple of researchers in South Carolina who proved this. They ran an experiment, and they went out to a neighborhood, and they posed as solicitors for fictitious charity. So they would go out, they'd ring the doorbell, someone would come to the door, they would describe the charity, and then they would ask the person to make a donation. And what they would do is they would show that person the list of everyone who had already donated. What they found was the longer the list was, the more likely the person in front of them would be to donate. The shorter it was, the less likely they would, right? Because imagine you've just come to the door, here's these 2 people, they're describing a charity, you don't know the people, you don't know the charity, you couldn't because it was fictitious, and then they want you to donate. And you've got to make that split-second decision. And whether you're consciously thinking about it or not, when you see that list of names, you either go, yeah, it seems like a lot of people are, I will too, or you go, yeah, not very many people have, don't think I will either. So social proof is a very common decision-making shortcut. It's a very common human behavior hack. So how do we use this in marketing? We're going to pop back over to politics for just a second, and you're going to find that I'm a bipartisan conference presenter. So here we have a Hillary example, and she says the average donation in your area is $23. Please match your neighbors in your town. So she's really, making you feel like this isn't the average donation across the Democratic Party or the average donation across the country. It's your neighborhood, your area, your town, right? And then we pop over to the Trump campaign. And he says, I've already heard from several folks in your community. Don't be the only Trump supporter in your neighborhood without a sign. So both of them were using social proof. Both of them were trying to convince people that other people like them, people who live near them, their neighbors, their friends, supported their particular campaigns. So both of them were using social proof in a very smart way. Here's an interesting example of social proof being exerted on me as the recipient of the email, and then they asked me to turn it around and exert it on people I know. So this is for a conference, and they said, see who's coming to the Direct Exchange Conference and invite your colleagues. And what they wanted me to do is look and see who had signed up for the conference, and they figured that if I saw names that I knew, or titles that were similar to mine, or agencies that were similar to mine, I would think, oh, gee, I should probably go to this too, right? So then I sign up, and then they want me to turn around and send the email off to the people that I know, so that they would say, oh, wow, Nancy's going to this conference, and she and I have similar interests, and we have similar responsibilities, and if she thinks it's a good conference, maybe I should go as well. So social proof exerted against me, and then they asked me to turn around and exert it against people I know. Very good example. This next example is from Middlesex Savings Bank. They say, discover why 9 out of 10 of our customers recommend us. That's a great example of social proof. Wow, 9 out of 10 people, that's making it easy for me, right? It's all about decision-making shortcuts. It's all about making it easy. I don't have to do a lot of research. 9 out of 10 people at this bank, that's a strong statement. Now, you're all in marketing. You know how powerful a testimonial can be, right? And testimonials are prime examples of using social proof. But I want to tell you 2 ways that you can take a good testimonial and turn it into a great testimonial. The first is you want your testimonial giver to be as similar to the testimonial receiver as possible. So if you're trying to convince small businesses, have a testimonial from a small business. If you're trying to convince young families in New England, have a testimonial from a young family in New England. The second thing that you want to do is you want to start where your prospect is. And generally speaking, that's a place of skepticism, right? They don't always believe what we marketers tell them. They wonder, is it going to be worth, the time and effort to investigate this new product or service? Is it really going to be better than my current solution? Is it really as good as the marketer says? So what you want to do is you want to get someone else to do the heavy lifting for you. So here we've got a testimonial that says, I never thought I would use an online bank. But after a personal situation required me to open an account, it was the answer. I've been happy ever since. So if you've got somebody who thought, I don't know about this whole online banking, I'm not really sure, I think I want a brick and mortar, then they read this and they think, that's exactly what I thought. I didn't think I'd ever use one, but gee, this person seems to think it's pretty good. Maybe I should try it. You start where the person is, that place of skepticism, and you bring them along on the journey. All right, our third human behavior hack is something known as the principle of scarcity. And what social scientists have found is if something is readily available, we may or may not be interested. We're interested, we take advantage of it. We're not interested, we don't. It's as simple as that. But just let us know that that something is only going to be available to a certain group of people, or it's only going to be available to for a finite amount of time. And that makes a huge difference. It's like a switch flips in us, and we want it badly. And that's the principle of scarcity. We've got exclusivity, only available to a certain group of people, and we have urgency, only available for a certain amount of time. As a matter of fact, there are a couple of researchers in North Carolina who proved just how much value we place on things that are scarce by doing the chocolate chip cookie study. So this is pretty cool. They had 2 glass jars, and they put 10 chocolate chip cookies in one jar and 2 chocolate chip cookies in the other jar. Same cookies in both jars. 10 in one glass jar, 2 in the other glass jar. And then they asked people to come up and taste a cookie. And they wanted people to rate the cookie based on how good they thought it tasted, how expensive they thought it was, and how popular they thought it would be. And the people who chose from the jar that only had 2 cookies rated those cookies higher on each of those 3 attributes. We place greater value on things that are scarce. If it's not readily available, if it's a little bit harder to get, we place more value on it. So how do we use it in marketing? Well, here's an example from Expedia. Look at their subject line. They say, last chance to join Expedia Rewards before the public launch. Like, wait a minute, I can join later? Well, yes, you can, but so can everybody else. You want to join now, before everybody else. Like, we like to be part of that exclusive group. We like to be part of that select group. We don't want to get something that everyone else can get. We want to get something that not everyone else can get. Or here we've got an invitation, a piece of direct mail for a bank, and they say an invitation to assume your simply preferred status. And I love this because it's basically oozing exclusivity. It's an invitation, not an offer, to assume, not to get, and then your simply preferred status. It just feels special. It feels exclusive. Nice use of language with that. Nice exclusivity. Well, here we have something for the International Association of Privacy Professionals. But look at what that subject line says. It says, new credential just for CIPP certified pros. So when you read that subject line, you know that this isn't going to everybody who's a privacy professional. It's not even going to everybody who's a member of the International Association of Privacy Professionals. It's going to a much smaller group, a subsegment, an exclusive group of people who have a particular certification. And when you see that, you feel like you're part of the special group. You feel that this is exclusive. You feel you should pay attention to it. Now, we've talked about exclusivity in terms of your product. We've talked about exclusivity in terms of your target, your customer, your prospect. Your sources can also be exclusive. This is for LL Bean, and they say the cotton in our T-shirts is sourced from the top 1% of the world's cotton. And you think, wow, I never really thought of it that way, but the top 1% of the world's cotton, they must be pretty good T-shirts, right? So this is the exclusivity side of the scarcity principle. Now let's pop over to the urgency side of the scarcity principle. And if you use urgency in your subject lines, if you're doing any email, you can expect anywhere from a 34 to a 36% increase in opens. That's how powerful it is. This is a stat from World Data. So here's a great example. How many people have the Taylor Swift squirrel pajamas? There we go. Okay, these are the ones from the "We're never, ever, ever going to get back together again" video. Come on, right? Okay, you're making me feel very lonely up here. But no, I'm having a little fun with you. I love this example because it oozes urgency, okay? It's the Taylor Swifter, the T-Swift daily deal. And then she says, while supplies last, ends tonight, today only. She does a fabulous job of changing the question from, do I want a pair of squirrel pajamas, to, can I get a pair before they've run out, right? Lots of urgency there. Or here we've got a good example from a financial institution. They say, starts free, stays free. It's your final simply free checking reminder. So anytime you can give somebody a final reminder, tell them it's last chance, give them a deadline, an expiration date, tell them it's this week only, this month only, today only, anything like that ratchets up urgency, and that's a really good thing to do. Final notice, final reminder, second notice, last chance, good things to do. The other thing that really underscores urgency is a countdown clock. As a matter of fact, according to World Data, including a countdown clock in your email can increase your click-through rates by 17%. But you can also use countdown clocks on your landing pages, on your website pages. It doesn't just have to be in your emails. But as you watch those seconds roll off, you're watching time slip away, and it just really underscores the urgency, like, I better get going now or I'm going to lose out. And speaking of losing out, has anyone here ever shopped at Beyond the Rack? Say, private online shopping club. I see a few hands maybe, yeah, okay. So it's private online shopping club, right? And what they do is they have designer merchandise, and they'll put a good discount on it, but you have to get in there and make your purchase within 48 hours. You need to be in and out in that 48 hours or you're gonna lose out. So there's your urgency. But something really interesting happened to me once. They were having Coach bags on sale. Might as well check that out, right? Who can't use one? So I go to the site, and there were 3 Coach bags, but really, I can only choose from 2. Because the one on the left was reserved by others. But they held out a little bit of hope. They said, reserved by others, check back in 12 minutes. Not 10 minutes, not 15 minutes, 12 minutes. So they're making me think maybe, just maybe, one might become available. And you knew, if I went back in 12 minutes and one became available, I would pounce on it because I would think I got one of the few remaining ones. This is scarce, and I was able to get one. So really interesting use of urgency there. All right, we're up to our 4th human behavior hack, and that's something known as commitment and consistency. And what social scientists have found is once people make a decision, or once they take a stand, they like to remain consistent with that when future opportunities arise. And they'll do so giving it little to no thought. So what does this mean to us as marketers? It means that if we can get that first yes, we're much more likely to get a second yes, a third yes, a fourth yes. This is particularly true if our first ask is relatively small, and if the answer is somehow public. So a couple of researchers went out to a neighborhood in LA to prove this theory. So they went to the neighborhood in LA, and they were asking people, how do you feel about safe driving? Well, as you might imagine, people were in favor of safe driving. It's kind of hard not to be in favor of safe driving. So the researcher said, great, I'm so glad you're in favor of safe driving. How about putting up a billboard on your front lawn saying that you support safe driving? Well, here people backed off. Right? It's like, I don't want to put a billboard up, and what are my neighbors going to think? What's it going to do to my view? What's it going to do to my property value? So very few people said yes. Only 17% of the people said they would put up the billboard. However, there was a small subsegment of those people, and in that small subsegment, 76% said yes to the billboard. So we have to say to ourselves, well, what was so different about that small subsegment? Well, it turned out that several weeks earlier, when the researchers had come by, these people had agreed to display a small 3-inch by 3-inch sign saying that they supported safe driving. So when the researchers came back and asked about the billboard, these people weren't evaluating the billboard the way everyone else was, which is to say from square one. No, for them, the consistency principle just kicked right in. It was consistent with their previous behavior. It was consistent with how they saw themselves. It was consistent with the stand they took. The decision-making shortcut kicked right in, and it was much easier for them to say yes, as opposed to anyone else who was thinking about it from the first time, and it was like, wow. So you're probably not spending time running around asking people to put billboards on their front lawn, so let's look at a few more commercial applications. This is a website for an organization called Make Change Count. And what they do is they teach financial literacy to kids. They focus on financial literacy for kids. So you can see in the top there, I've circled it in red, they want the kids to take the pledge. So that's step one. And you know what? That's relatively easy. You don't have to change the way you're spending your money. You don't have to change how much you're saving. You just have to pledge that you're going to do it. Then you go down to step 2, which I've circled, and they say you can print the pledge. And this is always good because if you have a tangible reminder of something you've committed to do, it helps reinforce it. It helps you live up to it. But the real killer here is that bottom red circle, the share. Because what they do is they tell the kids to take the pledge and then to share on social media. And when we let other people know what we've committed to do, we feel compelled to live up to it. Okay, if someone else knows that we've made a commitment, we feel that much more internal pressure to keep that commitment. So it's a really smart use of commitment and consistency. This next website twist commitment and consistency in a slightly different way. I think it's really brilliant, actually. This is a website called Stick. And you would go to the Stick website if you wanted to make or break a habit. So maybe you wanted to start running more, exercising more. Maybe you want to lose weight. Maybe you want to stop smoking. Whatever it is, you go to the website and you select your goal. And then you move on to what do we call it? Step number 2. Now, step number 2 is optional, but you move on to step number 2 where they ask you to choose a person or an organization you hate and pledge some money to them. So if I'm a Democrat, I might pledge $100 to the Republicans. If I'm a Republican, I might pledge $100 to the Democrats. And the idea is because giving money to an organization or a person you hate is not something that you normally do, it's not in keeping with your past behavior, it's not in keeping with your values, you'll be that much more likely to lose the weight or stop smoking just so you don't have to do this. It's really, really brilliant execution of commitment and consistency. You know, I am not going to be on the hook for giving money to someone that I don't like. I'm going to lose that weight. All right, here's another example. This is from Middlesex Savings Bank. And right in their letter lead, they say, because you are already a valued customer of ours, we'd very much like to do business with you, or to do more business with you. Because you're already a valued customer of ours, we'd very much like to do more business with you. And then they talk about the Freedom Gold checking account. Great example of commitment and consistency. Basically, in that letter lead, they're saying to you, they're signaling to you, don't evaluate this the way you would a solicitation from any other bank. You've already vetted us. You already know us. You already do business with us. All you have to do is say yes again. You know, some other bank knocking on your door, well, you know, you might have to investigate them a little bit more, but they want that decision-making shortcut to kick in. This was by far the best checking account acquisition package this bank ever did. They were dancing on the tables. They were so happy. It pulled so well. And you've got the commitment and consistency principle working there. You've got several other human behavior triggers in there as well. But it worked very, very well for them. Smart use of commitment and consistency. All right, here we have Delta. And what they're doing is they're offering a 30-day Delta Sky Club membership for just $90. And the reason they're doing this is they know that anyone who bites at the 30 days is much more likely at the end of that 30 days to say yes when Delta comes back and says, all right, now how about buying a full year one? They got that first small yes, and then they're going for the bigger yes. Or back to politics for a second. When Donald Trump was running for office, he sent out an email and he asked people to take a survey to help him prepare for one of his debates. So if you decide that you want to do this, okay, fine, I'm going to take the survey. You go on to the survey, lots and lots of questions that you answer, and then you get to the submit page, and they record your response, and they say thank you, and that's where they ask for a donation. Trump knew that at least for a segment of the people he was emailing, this was the way to go. Instead of just sending one email that said, hey, how about making a donation? He knew at least for some people, he wanted to get that cascade of yeses going. Yes, I'll open the email. Yes, I'll agree to take the survey. Yes, I'm answering this question and this question and this question. Yes, I'm submitting. And then he was hoping for, and yes, I'm going to make a donation. Really good use of commitment and consistency. So we've talked about 4 ways that we can trigger commitment and consistency. We can get someone to take a pledge, like make change count. We can remind them of a prior yes, like the Middlesex Savings Bank. We can do a trial membership, the way Delta did. We can get them to answer questions, like this survey. There's one other way that I want to share with you, and this comes to us courtesy of Robert Cialdini. Robert Cialdini is the author of the book Influence, Science, and Practice, and he explains that once somebody writes something down, they feel compelled to live up to it. Once you write something down, you feel compelled to live up to it. So here we've got Eye on Television, and they're running a weekly drawing for $1,000. All you have to do is tell them why you love Eye on Television. So you think, wow, I'd like to win $1,000, so I'm going to enter the contest. I better write something good, because they're not going to choose me if I don't write something good, right? So maybe you say, it's the only TV I let my kids watch, or it's appointment TV for us. Every Thursday night, that's what we watch. Or, we love the programs and we watch as a family. Whatever. You write it down. And then something interesting happens. As Cialdini points out, once you write something down, regardless of how trivial, and we're talking about what TV you watch, but regardless of how trivial, you feel compelled to live up to it. Because if what you say and what you do don't sync up, it feels bad. Mentally bad, psychologically bad. It can even feel bad physically. You can get that awful feeling in the pit of your stomach, okay? And so what happens is we will change our behavior to match what we said we did, because we want to alleviate that awful feeling. In fact, there's a term for it. Social scientists call it cognitive dissonance, and it's very unpleasant. And in order to alleviate cognitive dissonance, we will change our behavior to match what we said we did, so that what we say and what we do sync up. All right, our 5th human behavior hack is something known as choice architecture. And when social scientists talk about choice architecture, what they're really saying is the way choices are presented influences how we decide about them. We may not realize it, but it does. The way choices are presented to us influences the decisions we make about them. And it has to do with opt-ins and opt-outs and defaults. And the truth of the matter is, the person who explains this way better than I do is a behavioral economist named Dan Ariely. Perhaps some of you have heard of him. He's a Duke University professor. He wrote the New York Times best-selling book, Predictably Irrational. He does a Wall Street Journal column. And when Dan Ariely talks about choice architecture, he likes to talk about organ donor rates in Europe. So yes, even though we're here at a financial brand conference, we're going to take a slight detour into organ donor rates, okay? So what you're looking at is a chart that shows the organ donor rates in Europe. And as you can see, there's quite a dichotomy. There are some countries that hover up around 100%, and there are others that are down in the teens and 20s, and there's really not anything in between, right? And so you have to say to yourself, wow, what's driving that big difference? Why do some countries embrace it and others not? And so maybe you think, well, perhaps it's the country's politics or culture or religion, and those would all be really good guesses. But as Dan says, if you look at it a little bit more closely, you'll find that certain countries are actually very similar in those respects, but have very different organ donor rates. For example, Austria, which is the first blue bar, is at 100%, and just to the left of it is Germany at 12%. So it turns out that the single mitigating factor is the way that each country's Department of Motor Vehicles designs their forms. So in Austria, you need to check a box that says, I don't want to be an organ donor. And if you don't check the box, you are an organ donor. In Germany, you need to check a box that says, I would like to be an organ donor. And if you don't check the box, you're not an organ donor. And again, it goes back to the Kahneman quote that I opened with earlier. The brain doesn't like logical, rational, conscious thinking and will take any shortcut it can. So we just go with the default. I don't want to think about this. I don't want to make the effort of checking the box. I'm just going to go with the default. If the default is I'm donating my organs, fine. If the default is I'm not, fine. We take the easy way out. So you're probably not spending your days trying to get people to donate their organs, although I bet it feels like that sometimes, doesn't it? It does. It does. We should talk later. But let's look at some other commercial applications. So right now you're looking at a bored woman. And the reason she's bored is we're going to talk for just a moment about life insurance and disability insurance. And these are 2 topics that people don't like to talk about, don't like to think about, okay? They find them dry. Nobody likes to think about the fact that they're going to die at some point. And nobody likes to entertain the notion that they may get disabled. So when it's time to talk insurance, people really don't want to engage in the conversation. Typically, life and disability insurance is sold through the workplace. So what happens is HR sends out an email. They say, hey, the representative from the insurance company is going to be here. Sign up, make an appointment to meet with that representative. You'll find out about all the different policies, and if you see something you like, you'll buy it. And what happens? Basically that, okay? People just don't get around to it. They're not interested. They don't do anything. So one company decided to kind of flip things around and do things differently. So they worked with HR to send out this email that said, hi, Alexandra, we've scheduled your meeting with you. It's on this date, at this time, in this location. Here's the big orange add to calendar button. There's a blue add it to your calendar link, and way down at the bottom of the email, you can't even see it, was a blue link that said, is this time not convenient? Do you need to reschedule? So you know what happened? Meeting attendance soared, and so did purchases of insurance policies. Why? Because you had to take action to get out of going to the meeting. In the old way, you had to take action to schedule the meeting. In the new way, you'd have to take action to get out. So in the old way, the default was not to have the meeting unless you put in the effort to schedule it. In the new way, the meeting was scheduled for you. All you had to do was go. You had to actively get yourself out of it if you didn't want to go. You had to take, it was more effort to get out of it. So how you set up the defaults is very, very important. I'm from Boston, and one of my colleagues was running the Boston Marathon on behalf of a charity. So I thought, well, I've got to pledge, right? I've got to pledge her. So I pledged $100, and then this confirmation screen comes up, and I see that I'm actually being charged $104.50. They just factored in the credit card processing fee. Now, they did have a little orange edit button there. You can see I've circled that whole section in red. So if I wanted to, I could hit that little orange edit button and say, I only want to spend $100, that's it. But it was so much easier to just hit the large orange donate now button. And so I did, right? It was easy thing to do. I did it. But then another friend of mine was riding in the Pan Mass Challenge. So, you know, you got to be fair. So I donated $100 to his cause. I pledged him. And then the confirmation screen comes up, and you can see that there's a little box that says, you know, click here if you want to add $2.25 to cover the credit card fee. You know what? I didn't do it. Right? We all take the easy way out, and if social scientists and behavioral economists are to be believed, and I think that they are, this is what we do. We do what's easy for us. We don't opt in, we don't opt out, we opt to do nothing. So how you set up your defaults, how you set up choices for people makes a big difference. They still have free will. They can still do what they want to do, but you can kind of nudge them in one direction or another. You can take advantage of the fact that basically we're lazy. One last story. This is a true story. A friend of mine, her mom passed away from Alzheimer's. So I thought, you know what? Instead of sending flowers to the wake, I'm going to make a donation to the Alzheimer's Association. So I was flowers would probably be about $100. So I'm going to make a $100 donation. So I go to the Alzheimer's Association website. I make my way to the donation page. I get there, and lo and behold, as I'm skimming, looking at the various options, there's no $100 option. There's a $120 option, but there's not a $100 option. Now, a couple of rows below that, there's a completely empty, open box. I can put into that field whatever I want. But you know what? That required a little bit more effort than hitting the 120 button. So I donated 120. And then later I had the opportunity to talk to somebody who was associated with the Alzheimer's Association. And I said, so what's with this? There was no 50, but there was a 60. There was no 100, there was 120. Was that deliberate? He was like, Nancy, duh. Of course it was, It's absolutely what they were trying to do. So interesting use of choice architecture. All right, we're up to our 6th of the 7 human behavior hacks, and this is something I'm calling pricing perceptions, because it's a collection of different ways that you can treat pricing in order to increase the likelihood people will pay what you want them to pay. So here's the thing about getting people to spend money. If anyone here is responsible for getting people to purchase your products and services, you know how difficult that can be, right? It's not easy to get people to part with their money. And it turns out that science offers us a really good explanation as to why. But let's take a step back for a second. Imagine I have a hammer in one hand and a nail in the other hand, and I am hammering this nail into a board. And my hand slips, and I hit my thumb instead. That's going to hurt, right? That's going to hurt, and neuroscientists have found that that pain gets registered in a particular part of my brain. Neuroscientists have also found that when you need to reach into your purse or into your wallet, pull out your hard-earned cash and fork it over to someone, that exact same part of your brain gets activated. The same part of your brain that feels physical pain feels the pain of paying, okay? It really can hurt to have to spend money, and we don't like it. And that's one of the reasons it's so hard for us to get people to do what we want them to do regarding money. However, if you know about some of the human behavior hacks surrounding money, you're much more likely to overcome the pain of paying and get people to purchase. So let's look at a few of them. Here we've got 2 price tags. $120 is $120 is $120, you might think, but not so much. The one on the right has a decimal point and 2 zeros. The brain reads that as a larger number. Just reads it as, it takes up more physical space, the brain reads it as a larger number. If you're talking about savings, if you're talking about value, use the decimal point and the 2 zeros. If you're talking about the cost or the price of something, drop the decimal point and the 2 zeros, right? Still the same number, but how the brain perceives it makes a big difference. There have been studies that indicate if you take your dollar sign and make it half the size of the number, or if you eliminate it altogether, sales increase. Other studies show that if you put your price in the top right-hand corner of the page versus the bottom right-hand corner of the page, same price, people perceive the price at the top to be a higher price than when it's placed at the bottom, even if it's the same numbers, okay? Drexel University ran a study. They wanted to find out, do sales prices in red or do sales prices in black do better? Interesting question. What they found was for women, it didn't make a difference. But for men reacted better to red sales prices. When men saw sales price in red, it felt like a deeper discount, a better deal for them. Some research came out of UConn and Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts. And what they found was sales prices written in smaller font sizes actually outperformed sales prices in larger font sizes. And this was really surprising to me. I was like, wow, it's almost counterintuitive, because in marketing, if we're going to put something on sale, if we have a special deal, we're going to like shout it from the rooftops, right? We want to put it big and bold, and we want to make sure people don't miss it, right? And that seems to make sense. However, the research indicates that people equate the smaller font size with a smaller price. It just felt like a smaller price. It felt like a better deal. So at the end of last year, one of my clients decided they wanted to test this. It's like, all right, let's go for it. He got a 4.3% lift over his long-standing control. That was the only change he made. He had the regular price, he had the sales price, and he reduced the font size on that sales price. 4.3% lift over a long-standing control. So we've got the academic research that supports it, and we've got the in-market test that supports it. Bundles. Bundles are another great way to overcome the pain of paying. George Lowenstein is a neuroeconomist, and what he found was the brain doesn't like to sustain hit after hit after hit of pain. So if you're going to buy 3 things, for example, that's 1 hit of pain, 2 hits of pain, 3 hits of pain, the brain doesn't like it. The brain prefers the mental shortcut of bundles, because there's only 1 hit of pain. Even though the aggregate number that you're paying is larger, obviously, it's a single hit of pain, and the brain prefers that. So if you have an opportunity to bundle things together, do. It's a great mental shortcut, and the brain takes it. If you're going to have a sale on something, always put your original price on the left and your sales price to the right. Original price on the left, sales price to the right. And the reason for this is very often people do not know the absolute value of something. They don't know what the absolute value of something is, so they look at the relative value. For example, here we have the Beijing spa package, which sounds really nice, doesn't it? Like, ooh, a Beijing spa package. I wonder what do those cost, you know? But then you look and you're like, oh, it's $50 normally, but this is down to $30. And we go, relatively speaking, that's a pretty good deal. Now we know, you know? So we don't know what the absolute value is, but we look at the relative. So you always want the original price on the left, sales price to the right, so people can make that comparison. If you have several different products or several different flavors of a product, start with your most expensive one, and then put your less expensive ones further down. That left price or that top price is going to serve as the anchor, what social scientists call the anchor, and that will be the price that everyone compares things to. So you want your highest price there, and everything else beneath it looks like a great deal. The other thing you want to do is, if you're going to have the 2 prices, the further apart physically they are, the further apart monetarily they feel. So here we've got the kayaks, 80 to 40, and the salon services, 80 to 40. But that word from is sliding the 80 and the 40 further apart. And technically, because it's from 40, it could go up beyond that. But the 80 and the 40 in the kayaks and the 80 and the 40 in the salon services 40 looks like a better deal because it's physically further apart from the original price. So it all has to do with where elements are on the page. It's something known as magnitude encoding process. The environment or the context that your price appears in influences how people perceive that price. Speaking of prices, we should talk a little bit about charm prices. And prices ending in 9 are charm prices. And I don't just mean 99 cents instead of $1, although that certainly works, but any price ending in 9. William Poundstone is the author of the book Priceless. In that book, he cites no fewer than 8 different studies that indicate prices ending in 9 get a 24% lift in sales versus the rounded price. When we see 9, it just telegraphs to us that it's a good deal. Social scientists have found that for the most part, we don't really like to do a lot of math. It requires mental exertion. We look for the easy way out. 9 has become associated with a good deal, and so we go with it. As a matter of fact, I'm from Massachusetts, and the researchers at Mass Institute of Technology, MIT, ran a study. They took an article of women's clothing, and they offered it separately at $34, $39, and $44. And when all things were made equal, it sold best at $39. Certainly not the cheapest price, but we see that 9 and we go, ooh, good deal. Now, speaking of seeing money, let's talk for a minute about what happens when you see money. Several studies indicate that when you see money, it primes you or it predisposes you to be more selfish, less likely to help others, and more self-reliant. So you don't really think about these things, but several studies have shown this. If you see money, it makes you more selfish, less likely to help others, more self-reliant. So last year, H&R Block ran this campaign, and they want you to come and have your taxes done at H&R Block, and they tell you, we'll get you, the most money back that is allowable by law. And so you see this ad, and you see the 10s and 20s floating around, and if that primes you to be more selfish, you might think, awesome, I'm going to H&R Block because I don't want to give Uncle Sam $1 more than I need to. I want to keep all my money myself. But if it primes you to be more self-reliant, you might think, I don't need to pay H&R Block to do my taxes. I am perfectly capable of doing my own taxes. So it will be interesting to see how this pays out for them. Now, as we're talking about pricing, we should talk for just a couple of minutes about coupons, because coupons have a very interesting psychological effect on people. But it turns out it's not so much the coupon as it is the dashed line border. When we see that dashed line border, our eye immediately goes to it. Starch is the company that does magazine ad readership. And they found that you can have two ads, exact same two ads. The only difference is one has a coupon, the other one doesn't. The one with the coupon will get a 23% lift in readership regardless of what, if any, discount is inside that coupon. So if you have something that you really want people to read, consider putting that dashed border around it, that dashed line around it. When we see that, our eye automatically goes to it. We don't stop to think about it. We're so trained. It's a decision-making shortcut. It's a hardwired behavior. We see the dashed line, we go to it. So, obviously great if you're making an offer, but even if it's just there's information that you need people to read, try that dashboard. One of my clients, again, tested this. He got a 16% lift over his control, and it was, I think, like on a bill insert that he tested it, 16% lift. The other thing you should know about trying to get people to make a buying decision in the moment is give them a choice. Tulane University ran a study, and they found that if you give somebody a choice, you will quadruple the likelihood that someone will make a buying decision in the moment. If you only put one choice in front of them, people have nothing to compare it to. It's out of context, so they wait, they want to think about it. But if you put a choice in front of them, if there are 2 things, 3 things, 4 things, even 5, it gives them something to compare to, and they're 4 times as likely to make a buying decision. Now, as I tell you this, you might say, well, that's awesome, Nancy. I'm going to have lots and lots and lots of choices then. More choices, more response. Not so fast. People are going to be loving all the choices, but then analysis paralysis sets in. So 2, 3, 4, I wouldn't go beyond 5, but definitely better than 1. It will quadruple the likelihood. Now, as you're doing this, you might want to think about some new research that came out of Yale University. And what they found is if you have similar items with a slight price difference, you're 67% more likely to make a sale than if you have similar items that are all priced the same. That slight price difference is just another helpful tool that aids people in making a decision. All right, we're up to our 7th and final human behavior hack, and this is something I'm calling the Neuro Nine, because it's a collection of 9 neuromarketing and behavioral economic-based art and copy tips that you can use right away. I'm going to go through them really, really quickly, but they will impact how you do your designs and your artwork, as well as the copy that you choose to use. They will increase the likelihood that people will engage with and respond to your marketing messages. So the first one has to do with faces. If you have the opportunity to use faces in your marketing materials, do. We love faces. We are drawn to people's faces, particularly their eyes. Social scientists think this goes way back to our caveman days when we'd encounter a stranger and we would have to quickly determine friend or foe, because it could be a life or death situation here. We needed to know, is it a friend, is it a foe? How would we determine that? We'd look somebody in the face, particularly we'd look at their eyes. So if you have the opportunity to have eyes, or have a face looking out at you, particularly with the eyes making eye contact, do. We're hardwired to just return that look. We get drawn right in. If you're not going to do this, do this. Use the eye gaze to direct people where you want them to look. Again, we're hardwired to follow somebody's eye gaze. So here, Ally is having this woman look towards the headline and ultimately across to the field, because that's where they want you to look. If she were looking in the opposite direction, she would take your reader's eyes right off the page. We follow eye gaze. I can almost guarantee you that at some point during this conference, you're going to be chatting with somebody, they're going to look off to the side, you're not even going to think about it, you are going to look right off to the side. Chit-chat, they look, you're going to look. It's instinctive, it's reflexive, it's automatic. We follow people's eye gaze. Now, this is an interesting study. This came out of New Zealand from Victoria University of Wellington. And what they found was if you include a picture along with your text, along with your copy, it instantly increases the credibility of your text, even if the picture doesn't precisely support what the text is saying. Nancy, what are you talking about? Let me explain. They ran a study, and they had the sentence, turtles are deaf. And they either showed people that sentence alone, or they showed people that sentence along with a picture of a turtle. When the picture of the turtle was present, more people said that they believed the statement, even though looking at that thing really doesn't tell you if it can hear or not. You can't really tell, but the picture made the text seem more credible. They repeated the study. They did it with celebrities. Such and such a celebrity is dead. Such and such a celebrity is alive. When a picture accompanied the statement, regardless of what the statement was, people believed the statement when the picture was there. So at this point, you might say, okay, Nancy, I get it. Pictures are good. Pictures add credibility. What kind of pictures? Do I go with 4-color? Do I go with black and white? And my answer to you is, it depends. There was a study that came out of PLUS One, and they found that color photos or color images are shared more widely. So if your goal is to get your brand out there, to get a lot of shares, you might want to go with color. But then University of Ohio ran a study, and they found that black and white pictures actually get people to focus more on the essential elements, the essential benefits of the product or service. So this is the test that they ran. They had people read about camping radios, and some people read about the different camping radios, and next to each description was a color photo of that particular radio. Other people read the same list, the same descriptions, but next to their descriptions was a black and white photo of the camping radio. People who saw the photos in black and white were almost 50% more likely to choose a lightweight, compact camping radio. And those are, of course, two very essential features. If you're buying a radio to go camping, you want to make sure that it's lightweight and compact. You don't want to be lugging something really heavy with you. So what the University of Ohio researchers found, was that the black and white gets you to focus more on the essential elements, whereas color has you focus more on the cosmetic. Okay, we talked about the fact that pictures can improve the credibility of your text. So can charts and graphs. Cornell University ran a study, and they had people read about this new drug that was coming out. And then they asked people, do you believe what you just read? 67% of the people said, yeah, I do. They repeated the study, only this time they put a graph next to the exact same amount of copy. Exact same copy, I should say. And here, they asked people, do you believe what you said? The number climbed from 67% to 97%. And the researchers found that it wasn't that the chart added additional information. It wasn't that the chart made the information clearer or easier to absorb. It was simply that the presence of the chart indicated scientific veracity or scientific truthfulness or scientific base. It's like, oh, well, the chart's there. It must be true, right? So I'm not suggesting that you make up charts just for the heck of it. But if your text lends itself to a chart or a graph, do it, because when people see it, they just go, oh, it just gives it instant credibility. It's like, oh, there's the chart. It must be true. I'm not really going to look at the chart, but there's a chart, chart. It must be true. If you have the opportunity to use numbers in your copy, do. And there are two reasons why this is so important. One is numbers stand out in a sea of letters. When we read, we skim and scan. We don't read the way we write. When we write, it's one word followed by the next, followed by the next. When we read, we skim and we scan. And numbers stand out, right? We're skimming and scanning, and you see the number, and it sticks out. There's something known as the von Restorff effect, which basically says we notice things that stick out. Numbers stick out. The other reason you want to use numbers, though, is numbers promise ease and order. And the human brain craves ease and order. So if you have the opportunity to use numbers, do, but make sure you use the numeral. Don't spell it out. A study came out of BI University in Norway, or BI Norwegian School of Business, BI Norwegian School of Business. What they found was questions outperformed declarative sentences by 140 to 150%. So, declarative sentence, for those of us who haven't been in English class in a while, declarative sentence might be, wine improves your memory. The question version, of course, would be, does wine improve your memory? Questions invite people in. They increase engagement by 140 to 150%. Now, obviously, you can't write everything as a question, but consider using questions in some high-read pieces of real estate, like your headlines or your subheads or your subject lines, right? One little tip about questions, though, try not to phrase your questions so that they could get a simple yes-no answer, because if somebody says no, you've lost them. So instead of saying, are your marketing presentations good, which would either be a yes or a no, you'd say something like, on a scale of 1 to 5, where are your marketing presentations? So it forces you to answer in a way other than yes or no. Matt McGlone is a University of Texas researcher, and he did some research into what's known as cognitive fluency, which is essentially how easy is it for the brain to process information. What he found is you can have two sentences. They basically say the same thing. One of them rhymes, the other one doesn't. People will judge the one that rhymes to be the more truthful, more accurate statement. So we have woes unite foes versus woes unite enemies. They both say the same thing. The first one rhymes. People will judge that to be the more truthful, more accurate statement. Why? Social scientists have found that rhyming phrases are easier for the brain to process. They're more cognitively fluent. And if they're easier to process, they just feel more right? They feel right. Very interesting. And again, you can't write everything as a rhyming phrase, but something interesting to know. You think about taglines that rhyme. Not only are they easier to remember, but people judge them to be more truthful, right? Nationwide is on your side. Think about the OJ trial. If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. Really interesting. All right, last example. This has to do with framing. The words that you choose and the order that you put them in can make a huge difference in terms of how people respond to your message. So University of Geneva ran a study, and they asked people, can you smoke while you pray? People thought about it, and I guess they figured it was maybe a little sacrilegious. So 96% of the people said no. So University of Geneva didn't change the question, they just changed the order of the words, and they went from, can you smoke while you pray, to, can you pray while you smoke? 97% said yes. 96% no to 97% yes. Same two actions happening simultaneously, smoking and praying, praying and smoking. How the question was framed, the order that the words appeared in, made all the difference. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about availability bias. We've talked about the scarcity principle. We've talked about social proof. We've talked about commitment and consistency, choice architecture. We've talked about some pricing perceptions, and we've just wrapped things up with the Neuro Nine. I hope that you guys found lots of practical, actionable takeaways, but I want to make an offer to you. If you would like a tip sheet that recaps some of the key points that we talked about today, but also adds in some others that we just couldn't get to, please give me your business card at the end of this session. I'd be happy to email you this cognitively fluent, easy to understand PDF of a tip sheet, okay? Other than that, I just want to say thank you so much. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rank me highly on the evaluation. This is my first time here. If you didn't like what you heard, please tell me so I can make it better. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed being here.